This session is being recorded for the purpose of this class, obviously, only. And again, I would like to welcome Max to our Zoom gathering. Definitely, he will be playing a more active and dynamic role in the Zoom debates and sessions. And any changes that basically we would experience, he would be notifying you, but definitely our primary framework is going to be the same thing, and we hope to be able to evolve and develop the debate formats as we go along. What is crucial for me personally is to be able not to develop a binary really stance or position, and that is how the format has gone, going back to the dominant form of argumentation in our culture, which is treated as basically a war between the opponents and the proponents. Many issues could be multi-layered, dialectical, more complex than catches basically the eye. What is crucial for you in the context of this course is to be able to develop that kind of multi-dimensionality to all these points. Now, definitely it doesn't mean that we can yield to any kind of trivial, sentimentalized, for instance, argument. In any art of persuasion, and definitely this is something that you have probably studied in high school, ethos, it is the authority with which basically you speak, and you establish that through your own knowledge, prior knowledge, and also background knowledge, sources, authoritative sources that you would be using. You would be building your ethos, your authority, your authorial representation is very, very significant when it comes to the act of communication. And then, of course, you have logos. Logos would be the logic, the evidence, the examples that you bring to bear on your argument, whether in spoken discourse or in writing. And then you have the pathos. It is impossible really to be phlegmatic, meaning, excuse my choice of the word, being indifferent. You know, there is no sense for apathy. There is always feelings involved, directly or indirectly, in the open or in subtle forms. So ethos is very important. It contributes to a discussion. But if an argument is really just built on, let's say, feelings, it doesn't go very far. You have to have a balanced representation of the logos, pathos, and ethos to be able to develop a compelling, a forceful argument. So with that introduction in mind, and also the fact that I have sent you, and hopefully you have read it, my redefinition of our expectations from these debates, and my general recollections from the first debate that we had, called General Basic Comments. And definitely it was something that you had access to through your recorded Zoom video. So our discussion for today is on claim number 2. Could someone refresh my memory what claim number 2 is?
So claim number 2 is some languages are more advanced and expressive than others.
Exactly. So is this a true claim, or this is really a misconception that we need to correct? So what is the linguistic perspective about this? Now, definitely, there have been multiple readings for this week, including Italian is beautiful, German is ugly. Aborigines speak a primitive language. Some languages are harder than others. And the meanings of words should not be allowed to vary or change. And English spelling is catastrophic. So we do have quite a range of sources and texts to draw on for different aspects of an argument. An argument definitely has to diversify. And apart from the type of the argument that we are going to be using, which is very significant, all of them would draw on evidence, counterpoint, so on and so forth. So with that introduction in mind, let me break you into breakout rooms for the discussion of the debate. I would be open to suggestions as to if we should put basically the pros and the cons in separate rooms so that they practice their presentation, or they could basically spread out in all different rooms and present their viewpoints within that particular room. And then when it comes to the main floor, then obviously they could somewhat conceptually congregate and present their pro and con views. Now, I thought it would be more realistic and less imposing to pick judges from the members of the audience. Or we could always ask for volunteers, but if there are no volunteers, we would be assigning basically those judges. So overall, the first debate went extremely well, and I could see this is reflected in the afterthoughts, the summaries, the integrated basically notes, and the judges. Actually, we had 2 or 3 judges who had posted their observations of the first debate, and I thought they were very objective and well balanced in what they had reported, and that is their main or primary basically function. But that doesn't mean that the judges cannot give more credence, let's say, to one side, not because of the position that they occupy, but because of the kind of argument that one side may bring to bear on the debate. The judges may have a totally different view. So with that in mind, so is there a particular preference for either format, the pros and cons together, and then, or we could just spread them out, but when we come back to the main floor, then they could be in a more loosely cohesive group. Okay, so 7 people in breakout rooms. In every room. Okay, so waiting for everyone to return. So let's begin the debate on claim number 2, that some languages are more expressive than other languages. Now, we do have a few people, actually more cons, if I'm not mistaken, than pros. And we do have a couple of judges. Anyone who would be interested in joining?
Could I join? I actually thought I was supposed to be on. I think I was put in pros for last week.
Uh-huh.
Could I jump on in for that?
Sure.
Thank you.
So you want to join in? Yes, we could add your name.
Or Jasmine Lee.
Yes.
Okay. And you're arguing pro.
Yeah, I can do pros.
Okay.
Max, do we have 2 judges?
The only one I have down is Alexandra Mason. But in the room I was just in, Kaylee Delos Santos indicated to me that she may be able to judge if needed.
Okay. Anyone else who would be interested in serving as a judge? So you definitely will be earning extra, you will be earning credit for participation, symbolic credit as well.
Could I be a judge?
Sure. You look like one.
Hurt. So Emily Touch, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then professor, I signed up to be on the claim 2 for con side.
Mhm. And your name has not appeared,
No, it wasn't on the list.
so we could add you.
Yeah, I added her.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're arguing con, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, with that in mind,
Thank you.
we should be ready to.
For now, first, somebody in my breakout room had a question. She asked if when they submit their document for this debate, do they need to include counter arguments and rebuttals?
Yeah, definitely. It is a summary of basically not only what they said, but the entire group.
Got it.
The most salient points and the counter arguments. That would be crucial to the whole process of writing basically their essays, which would be critical essays, and no critique could really exist without discussing the merits and the limitations of counter arguments. Now, obviously, their particular point of view would be more salient, but counter arguments should always be accounted for. So, with that in mind, since you are familiar with the claim that some languages are said to be more expressive than other languages, let's begin with the pros. Now, a level of cooperation is needed within a group so that basically everything is not as spontaneous as, for instance, was during the first meeting, but it could be semi-planned in the sense that different individuals could address different points of the argument or expand on the same argument. How you're going to cooperate, definitely it is through your connection, through your access to everyone's email, And definitely, you know, what the position of other people in class basically is about that particular topic. So I don't know if you could loosely cooperate, that would be ideal. I mean, in the future debates. So let's begin with the prose, claim number 2.
Okay. I think that especially when it says like some languages, I think are more advanced than others, because in that regards, I see it as like efficiency of like how well you're able to translate your thoughts and get it across to the other person. And there are definitely some languages that are more direct and more expressive than others. For example, in English, it was said that we have to use a lot of like descriptions to build upon our thoughts and kind of create them. But there's also languages like in German that they have a lot more complex grammar. And even when you address something, you tend to use like 3 genders and then there's 4 cases in it. So I think that in that sense, if the more complex you have of grammar, sometimes the more efficient you can be in translating your thoughts. And if you can shorten up your sentences, it makes it easier to have like a more fluid conversation where you're kind of pinpointing exactly what you're wanting to say. Whereas just being descriptive, you can sometimes get lost between how you take that, like how the information is translated to the other person.
I agree with Jasmine. So although all languages are capable of expressing any thought a human can think of, some languages have more vocabulary that can describe such thoughts more effectively. So some languages only have a small vocabulary compared to others. So according to Myth 7 in the book Language Myths, it states that we need words to express our thoughts, and with fewer words, some thoughts will be harder to express. So if a language has more synonyms for a word compared to another language, the speaker will be able to express their thoughts or feelings more precisely. So Nature of Language states, Eskimos have several distinctive words for different types of snow that in English it's just called snow. So this means that Eskimos are able to give more details and express more precisely what snow they're talking about compared to English.
And to add on to that, I think that we have a lot of synonyms for words, but they don't mean the exact same thing, which gives us an ability to express a very specific idea that we couldn't have expressed with a word that is considered a synonym to the word. I also think that the English language is rooted from a lot of different European languages, and it gives a more complexity to the vocabulary that because it's built off of vocab that we had already known or used before. And so it gives us just a bit more expressiveness in our language.
I also want to add that language advances because there's a purpose of making it easier to comprehend and understand the language trying to be learned, as well as to make it clear for the other parties to understand. And I found examples in the Nature of Language, which a language such as Esperanto was created to simplify communication between 2 parties, and then as well as in Myth 19, that there are specific sentences that are clear in their language that are not in the actual English language.
Very good. Do we have any other pro debaters? If not, let's move on to, we'll come back to these topics, the cons.
Now it says Taya Din was supposed to be a pro, but I don't see her here in the list of participants.
Could you mark her name? Is she here?
I do not see Taya Din here.
Okay.
Then on the con side, I don't see Kimberly Rivera.
Mhm. Thank you. So claim 2, cons. And cons would be the ones who basically oppose the argument that some languages are more advanced, more complex, more expressive. They would definitely argue that all languages could be equally more expressive, equally more complex and advanced.
I chose the side opposing to that statement. I believe that all languages are of the same complexity and expressiveness. And I took many quotes from the Nature of Language textbook. And the first term that I found was linguistic relativism, which recognizes all known languages and dialects as effective means of communication. Going off of that term, I believe that all languages do have their levels of complexity, and although that they are different levels, they all contain the amount of complexity that another language has.
Right.
Another quote that I took from the book is, any language used in a given context can undergo such a process of growth and differentiation, sometimes by borrowing foreign terms, sometimes by elaborating its own. So again, each language has had its time to develop and grow over time. Like I said, although there's different grammar rules, every single language has its own complex systems in which they are all difficult to learn and they all take time to understand. A lot of languages are based on culture, and I think that's where I see differentiation in languages. But culture, I believe, is different from like the analytical parts of language and the rules that each system has.
Excellent, yes.
To add on to Mariah, as someone said that the German language was hard to understand, other languages would think that English is inconsistent, and English spelling is inconsistent since we have a lot of unnecessary synonyms, which makes the English language less advanced than others.
I wanted to add on to what Mariah said also, like there are many characteristics to each language that make it complex in their own way. So like an example of this is like for the Chinese language, their grammar is like more simple compared to the English language. However, they have a more complex tonal system.
Right, it's interesting that Chinese actually word order is comparable to English, even though they belong to two distinct, basically, language systems. As you said, you know, Chinese is tonal and English is not. But when it comes to the word order, the two are really comparable in many ways, grammatically speaking.
I believe that all languages are equally expressive because even though in some languages one word can mean something and in the other language you need a whole sentence to say that, I think that happens in many languages and it can like switch around. But you can still express what you want to express. Sometimes it just takes more words.
Can you think of a word or an expression in language that you know that you may run into difficulty expressing it exactly or identically, but still you could convey the shades of the meaning? I can't think of a word, but I was doing ethnographic work a few years ago and in Iranian American Heritage School. And I came across a word which was haskadam. You know, teachers, whenever they came upon elegant, attractive handwriting or penmanship of the students, it was not the penmanship class, but culturally, there was great sensitivity towards basically how what the students wrote looked, rather than if what they had written was correct. They were more interested in the elegance. They were more interested in the form. So teachers would say, oh, haskadam. Literally, it means I enjoyed it. So when I was translating it in English, I enjoyed someone's handwriting. That doesn't make much sense. Okay, so I thought of related words. Someone mentioned even, you know, what we tend to think as synonyms are not really the same semantically. So I thought, oh, it is delightful to see what you have written. What a delight. But this is more restricted again. It is enjoyment, pleasure, delight. All these have related meanings or can be seen in some cases as being synonymous. Then I looked deeply into the subtleties and the shades of the meanings. And I realized that has kardan, which is the verbal form, has a range of feelings. Actually, it ranges from esoteric to erotic connotations and meanings. So it was only then that I realized that elegant handwriting has a cultural significance that was, in a way, expressed in that particular word. Now, obviously, for the American culture, you know, it is not the same thing. Penmanship is becoming obsolete. Perhaps some of you experience in the third grade, but that was it. You didn't go beyond that. But anyway, that word has, it is actually, it sounds like has, the English word, he has kardan. It could be phonetically transcribed like that, has. But I thought, oh, this is not really very descriptive. I ended up writing actually 3 pages about the meaning of this word. So the question is, you know, this was a culturally specific term. Was I able to express that in English? Does that mean that Persian, for instance, in this case, is more expressive than English when it comes to this particular domain in which the word is used? So, as you said, all languages are equally complex and equally expressive. But the fundamental question, going back to the cons, is, are we able to express all those shades of meanings equally well with facility or not? Which goes back to the whole question of the relation between language and its grammatical system and really our thoughts and feelings and emotions. So that's just a question. Next person in the econ group.
Now, somebody asked if you could switch to pro. Is it too late for that, or?
No. I mean, this is a debate.
Okay.
We can always switch back and forth.
Okay. All right. So Heard. So that leaves just Jesus on the con side. He hasn't gone yet.
Mhm.
I just wanted to add that the expressiveness of a language would depend on who's speaking the language. So if you were to get, for example, a native Spanish speaker, they could be very expressive with the Spanish language. Whereas if you were to get a like high school student who was taking a year of Spanish, they probably couldn't be as expressive because it isn't their first language.
Interesting point, yes. So you're saying that it has nothing to do with the language itself. It is who basically uses the language. And even within the same language, not everyone may be equally expressive, right? Some people are more expressive
Yeah.
than others.
And also I wanted to add that it doesn't matter how many words a language has,
Mhm.
because you can argue that that would make it more expressive, but the average adult person only knows about like 20,000, 30,000 words. So it doesn't matter if there's hundreds of thousands of words if you don't even know how to use them.
Exactly. I remember when I was learning English, believe it or not, I had memorized the entire dictionary. And I had a friend, a competitor rather than a friend, and we did not lose any opportunity to embarrass one another. And basically, our game was to ask what a particular word meant. Not only what a particular word meant in the English dictionary, it was an English dictionary that I had one that I had found in front of the Tehran University, and it was pretty old dictionary. But I was not really paying attention to the fact that language changes, the English language was changing. It was different from Old or Middle English. But this dictionary, I can't recall, but even then in 1975, it was about 56 years old. So this friend of mine one day came to me and said, "Do you know what make water means?" I scratched my head and I was baffled. I didn't know what it meant. And he said, "I got you." Now, of course, he was a Persian speaker. I had already learned Persian as a foreign language. It was my second or third language. But he was a Persian, basically native speaker. And I felt really embarrassed. So I begged him to tell me what it meant. I knew literally what it meant. And he said, "Oh, it means to piss and to urinate." I said, I don't know much about English, but I think this may not be used. And we got into an argument. But that is the kind of knowledge, as Jesus was saying, we were gaining this knowledge from the dictionary, even though probably we knew more words than any native English speaker, but when it came to real communication, we really failed, miserably. So it is true. It is not really the number of the words that you know, or if you know all the words found in a language, would that make you more expressive, or you would be more referential? For instance, in our case, we could refer to the dictionary where this entry could be found, but we couldn't have a meaningful communication with a native English speaker. Are you done, Jesus?
Yeah.
Then Justin said he wanted to switch to pro.
Okay.
Oh, my bad. Do I go right now?
Yes.
Okay, my bad. For pro, I like to say that when people of different cultures speak to one another, they can misunderstand each other. That's why some languages can be more like advanced or expressive than each other because of whether it's the pronunciation, the way the word is spoken, complexity, dialect, accent, or even grammar.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence of that is from the book. According to the book, some British dialects are more vulgar, such as the Birmingham and London Cockney. And in a survey they conducted, people would prefer an English accent over a Glaswegian accent because, quote unquote, the English accent had a nicer way of speaking, meaning that the Glaswegian accent was more rough, more hard spoken. And this is my self-opinion, but it's also shown in between Old English and Modern English. Old English is a bit more, has a dramatic flair. It's more romanticized, whereas Modern English, it's more simple, straight to the point. So based on geographical spheres, cultural norms, the pressures of those geographical spheres and social connotations, it changes the way how we perceive expressiveness and how advanced a language could be. So let's take into account like K-pop. K-pop, as it's just a music genre, right? But some Americans as a whole think it's more expressive. It's better than some English music. And I'd like to bring up Chomsky's theory of recursion, which exemplifies that all languages are equally as expressive. But according to an American linguist, Daniel Everett, he studied the Amazon basin Kronha tribe, which showed that they weren't as expressive as other languages. They had tiny expressions. They didn't have a number system. They couldn't even classify colors. They only went on what they saw and what was present day to them. And that's why I believe all languages are more advanced, could be more advanced or expressive than others.
Yeah, interesting, basically, points that you raised. Now, is this something which is inherent in the language structures, or, as you said, these are social connotations, basically somewhat interjected or juxtaposed with the ways a particular language is used, rather than being inherent, basically, systems. Now, definitely in American English, there is a preference for a particular variety of English, or what is called American Standard English, so to speak, than, let's say, certain accents that are spoken. You mentioned geography in different parts of the United States, for instance, in the South, so on and so forth. And definitely, even when it comes to English, you do have high registers, low or informal registers. The question really boils down to this again. Even though you claim that all these languages are equally complex, but your argument is still some languages could be more expressive than other systems, depending how you define basically expressive. So, for instance, in an Amazon language, they may not be expressive in terms of having cardinal and ordinal, elaborate, basically, systems of enumeration as we do. Probably it is not as elaborate as it is now, that if you go back to Old English or Chaucer's time, much older. Does that really take anything away from the expressiveness of a language that could be more expressive in areas that, for instance, today's English would be experiencing a degree of challenge and difficulty? Why? Because it is not familiar. Unless we want to make the unfamiliar familiar, which will take some effort. So anyway, this is an interesting point that you raised. Anyone else?
on that, I don't think it would be necessarily like a hindrance if a language isn't that complex in another aspect. Because I think culturally, that's why languages are so different, because they evolve with its people and then the needs of how they communicate and how they want to communicate. So I think that it would have evolved differently had it been more important to them in their culture. So I guess they could be more complex in other areas that are more important to them. And I think that's another reason why some languages can be more expressive, maybe just by like nature of their culture. They have like the capacity to be expressive and everything, but I think just fundamentally some cultures speak more expressively and like more descriptive and detailed, which is why the language and the culture like combined with it could be more expressive.
Yeah, definitely. It means the language has been used in more domains. For instance, it is much easier for me to conduct this class in English than Kurdish. Now, that doesn't mean that Kurdish, for instance, is less expressive or less sophisticated. It is basically my ability and my exposure, my education, everything. The topic, which is in question, all these things would make it much more manageable for me to be able to spell out basically what I intend in this language rather than Kurdish. As you said, it really has something to do with the evolution of the language and the limitations that that language has, for instance, faced. When it comes to even education in that language is still forbidden in Iran, in Iraq. Not in Iraq, but they do have some kind of autonomy. In Turkey. So how could that language, for instance, evolve to show its expressiveness in science, for instance, in philosophy? Where, for instance, German has evolved to become the language of philosophy in a way, has created basically its own vocabulary. It doesn't mean that other languages such as Kurdish or any other languages would not be able to arrive at that point. It is the question of using the language in more domains. And then those words could be created either through borrowing or through word formations that different languages have. They use existing word formation rules. They use compounding. They borrow. They combine basically the words depending on the grammatical structures that they have in place for word formation. So anyway, this is a very, how should I put it, sensitive, basically, topic. Let's hear from the judges.
Hello. So both sides brought up fantastic points, and I'm finding myself having a really hard time deciding between one or the other. I think I'm gonna go with pro, just because you guys brought up a really good point that that some languages are a lot more direct and to the point than others, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That it depends on what the culture values and what the culture needs. So yeah, I think that there's definitely differences in complexity based on what you guys have presented. And again, that's not a bad thing. That's just kind of a fact. So yeah.
Very good.
I'll have to agree that both sides brought up, they used a lot of like evidence for their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that I'll go with pro for this argument as well, in terms of like the structure of their argument.
I wanted to say what I got from this our debate was that it really depends on how you define like an advanced language. The pro side definitely argued more that a language is considered more advanced due to
like the efficiency of how they can communicate, or the complexity of their grammar, or for example, English has more synonyms. It depends on like how specific their language can be. But I also liked how the con side argued that the difficulty of a language really depends on who you are and how you learn it, and who's trying to understand it. Because I think Hasis said that like someone who's native in Spanish would be way more expressive than someone who's barely learning it, even though it is the same language. So I think it depends more on who it is rather than the language itself.
Max, did you have any observations? Anything to wrap this up?
Do you want me to give my opinion on which side I would take?
Not necessarily. I mean, to wrap up the debate, and definitely, you know, you're welcome to express your point of view as well.
Yeah, well, like other people were saying, I thought that both sides made very compelling points. Yeah, you can't ignore the fact that in some languages, you can just say things that you can't in other languages, but at the same time, every language, if you put it into words, even if you have to use more words or different construction, you can say it. So personally, if I were debating, I would have taken the con side, but that's just me. I'm not telling anybody what to think.
Okay. So thank you very much. Actually, it was a very insightful debate on both sides. Much more elaborate and much more organized in terms of argumentation, the type of evidence basically that was brought to bear on the central argument. And definitely the third one is going to be then, much better than this one. So I'm generally pleased with the way the debate went. One thing that definitely I wanted to bring to your attention, and probably you have already seen it, is let me quickly share. I know we are out of time. So it is important that you look at the prompt for the first essay in anticipation of what you are going to be writing. This is very crucial because as you read, you could highlight relevant points that you may be able to use in your essay. So to show you prompt one, and soon you will be working on did I pass it? So this is what basically I added. The video links for the Zoom session would be found here. The lecture notes would be here, obviously. So Going down the list, peer review forms, summaries, Zoom debates, debate tips and comments would be here. And I did send you basically the links, but what I want to show you essay topics. So this is, prompt one, but you have two options. It is important that you look at occasionally, and as you are working on your homework, you are preparing for the debates, whether you are in the camp of pros or cons or just as member of the audience, definitely you could take notes that would be crucial to the process of writing your essay. So language defines basically us as humans. This is on the first debate that we had, and the second one is on the second claim that we discussed today. So it is important that you really read the prompts so that you do the readings in light of what you are going to be writing to compile arguments, counter arguments, and evidence and preparation for writing your essay. Another thing which I have added is critical thinking resources. Now, this is very important, argument and critical thinking resources. Types of arguments, for instance, there are different types that we may want to explore, not only in the debates, but also when it comes to writing the essay. So familiarize yourself, and I do not expect you to be able to watch everything or go over everything, but definitely this also would be crucial to the process of your writing essays with greater enlightenment and critical ability. So with that in mind, I don't want to keep you any longer. Keep up the good work, and I will continue reading your submissions and commenting on. We will be sending you, Max will be sending you the pros and the cons group, and also the judges, the names, hopefully by Sunday, so that you would have enough time to prepare. Okay, any questions?
I had a question about the activities for this week.
Yes.
They look, for week 3, the activities look identical to the ones in week 2.
Yeah, I did notice the reduplication. Actually, I saw it this morning. But because we do have quite a few essays from the language myths, it is fine to have basically still the previous week in the background, it is important to spend about at least 3 weeks on human language and animal communication, if that's what you meant. So I wouldn't worry about that, because we did have quite a few readings relevant to the purpose of our discussion today.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Itzel also had a question she posted in the chat. Do we have to choose the option we debated about, or can we choose another option?
Of course, you're not compelled. You know, this is the whole point. You could always change your mind. You could change sides. Okay, take care, everyone.
It's nice to meet all of you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. One more to go. Yeah, I noticed that basically for the debate, I had not shared or I had not made you the co-host.
Right.
So we'll do that next time so that you could navigate.
Okay. And what day is the next debate? Is that Tuesday?
All the debates, if I'm not mistaken, are supposed to take place on Thursdays.
Okay, so 17th.
Yeah.
Heard. So I should, by Sunday, you said I should send out the pros and cons list, right?
Help them, if they know.
Okay.
But how did it go? I think it went pretty well today.
Yeah, I think it went pretty well today also. My breakout room, we were able to kind of talk about some things. I was able to give them some counter arguments that they had to address, but I guess I didn't really have to do that because we just gave the pro con side and the con side, and we didn't really make them do a rebuttal.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
We'll be in touch. Take
Okay.
care.
All right. Now, do you want me to send you the final list of everybody who took attendance, or do you not need me to do that? Since I told you wasn't here.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, to keep track of who contributed and who didn't.
Okay.
We don't want to give them credit,
Okay.
where it doesn't belong.
All right.
Simply because they signed up.
All right.
Okay, take care.
All right.